Wednesday, good evening. I'm Chris Nachkate. Welcome to APTN National News for this Monday. The inquest into the death of 16-year-old Aisha Hudson began at the Law Courts building in downtown Winnipeg this morning. Aisha Hudson was shot and killed by Winnipeg police in April of 2020 after allegedly robbing a liquor store and driving off with a group of other teenagers in a stolen Jeep. A previous review done by Manitoba's Children and Youth Advocate states that Hudson was not able to get the help she needed from various government systems. All police-involved fatalities are subject to a public inquest. It's important to note that the inquest does not attribute blame. Instead, it will examine circumstances, identify systemic issues, and make recommendations to prevent similar tragedies in the future. Hudson was a member of the Barons River First Nation in Manitoba and was living in Winnipeg at the time of her death. Elder Cheryl Alexander and singer Raven Hart opened the inquest with a ceremony this morning. This inquest will continue throughout February and into March. We have more on this story at aptnnews.ca. The trial of Nick Tilsen, the founder and CEO of the NDN Collective, has ended with a hung jury. NDN Collective is an activist organization based on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. Tilson was charged with assault, aggravated assault, and obstruction of a law enforcement officer. The charges stem from a 2022 incident in Rapid City, South Dakota, where Tilson said he stopped to observe an interaction between an unhoused man and a local police officer. The officer involved said Tilson came at him with his truck, but video evidence did not back that up decisively. After 3 days of testimony last week, the jury was unable to come to a unanimous decision and a mistrial was declared. The state has 45 days to appeal. Quebec police have confirmed the arrest of 2 teenagers in the fatal shooting of 2 men in the Cree community of Mistrial. The shooting happened last Wednesday in the Mistissinie Cree Nation, located about 600 kilometers northwest of Quebec City. The male teenagers, who are both 17 years old, were arrested last Friday and made their first court appearance on Saturday. Both have been charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. 30-year-old Barabin Niposh and 29-year-old Daniel Binak were found deceased Wednesday night in a car that had multiple gunshots. According to police, the incident is likely linked to organized crime and may have been done to settle a score. Following the events, Mistissinie was in a lockdown until last Thursday morning. The teen's second court appearance took place today. RCMP have charged a man in connection with a suspicious death investigation at a First Nation in northwestern Saskatchewan. On Friday, January 30th, at around 8:45 a.m., Meadow Lake RCMP were called to a home in the Waterhen Lake First Nation. When RCMP arrived, they located 37-year-old man from Waterhen who was seriously injured. He was later pronounced deceased by EMS at the scene. The man's family has been notified and victim services is being made available. 24-year-old Sky Lasas has been arrested and charged with second-degree murder. The name of the victim is not being released at this time. RCMP say the victim and the accused knew each other. Lasas will make his next court appearance in Meadow Lake Provincial Court this morning. The family of the late Sharon Buccini lost their fight at Ontario's Court of Appeal to get her Indian status back. Their story of how they lost status began more than 100 years ago in the Sandy Bay First Nation in Manitoba. That's when Buccini's grandfather, St. Pierre Cook, accepted Métis scrip. Last spring, the Buccini family attended the appeal hearing at Osgood Hall in Toronto for their mother's case. Steve Buccini first applied for his mother's status in 1998, and she was awarded that status in 2007. But 2 years later, in 2009, the registrar at Indigenous Affairs deregistered Sharon because her grandfather had accepted Métis scrip. Sharon later passed away only in July 4th in 2024, and shortly after, a lower court overturned the registrar's decision, giving her status despite her death. However, the federal government appealed that decision, and last Friday, Jonathan George sided with the 2009 decision to remove Sharon's status. Steve Buccini said they'll appeal that decision.
Fights in me to keep moving forward, you know, to get my ancestors, my family, their rights, you know. We should have been allowed to go back into treaty back in when they allowed the whole band back in. Should have been allowed back then. And here we are 100-something years later, you know, 1885. Oh my God, like, you know, everybody else was allowed back in.
5 Ontario First Nations have joined the legal fight against Ontario's Bill 5 and the federal government's Bill C5. That brings together a total of 14 Ontario First Nations into the litigation, which began in July of last year. The implementation of Bills 5 and C5 would mean Ontario and Canada could push through with proposed developments like the controversial Ring of Fire. There has been a large-scale opposition to both bills ever since they were introduced and fast-tracked into legislation. With little to no input from First Nations, many of them argue the proposed major economic Ring of Fire resource development will threaten their way of life. That's why 5 more First Nations have joined a constitutional challenge of the fast-track bills at Ontario's Superior Court. Lawyer Kate Kempton says there has been a growing concern.
Every citizen should care that their governments are giving themselves, frankly, dictatorial powers. And a lot of that's gone under the radar, and it shouldn't. But particularly Indigenous nations struggling to get back everything that was stolen from them over the last 250 years, especially their decision-making authority over what happens to, in, and on their land.
Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand is headed to Greenland this week to open a new Canadian consulate in the territory. It will be opened in Greenland's capital Nuuk on Friday with a press conference on Saturday. Anand will also be joined by Governor General Mary Simon for the trip. Interest in Greenland and Arctic security has grown in recent months, with U.S. President Donald Trump's threats to annex the territory. Greenland is an autonomous territory of Denmark, which is part of NATO. The majority of Greenland's residents are Inuit. A former national chief of the Assembly of First Nations has joined the Arctic Gateway Group in Manitoba. It's an organization that runs the Hudson Bay Railway and Port of Churchill in northern Manitoba. A recipient of the Order of Canada, Ovid Mercredi, says he wants First Nations and northern communities to also benefit from the province's proposed development in Churchill. So far, the Manitoba government said it wants to expand the railway and port in Churchill and pitch it as a nation-building project that would boost Arctic sovereignty and have more Canadian goods shipped to European market. Mercredi says northern Manitoba's time is now, and he hopes the new development will support new jobs and opportunities for the prosperity of First Nations and people living in northern Manitoba. Mercredi is also the former chief of the Mississippipoistic Cree Nation, also known as Grand Rapids. The Arctic Gateway Group, which was established in 2018, is owned by 41 First Nations and northern communities with a goal to diversify trade routes in Canada. Tina Howells is up next with a story about BC's drug crisis. Don't go away. Thanks for staying with us. Now to British Columbia, where the provincial government's pilot program to decriminalize small amounts of drugs has come to an end. APTN's Tina Howells takes a closer look at what's happening as the war on drugs rages on, and a warning some of the images in this report may be disturbing.
Vancouver, BC, voted one of the top places in the world to live. But right in the city are 10 square blocks that make up Vancouver's downtown east side. Although the toxic drug crisis is not limited to just the downtown east side, there isn't anywhere else where the sad reality of drug addiction is more open. With hundreds of people struggling on the streets to survive, many here are also heavily addicted. James Harry is a former drug addict. 7 years ago, he He, alongside his wife Janet, decided to get clean and change their lives for good. He founded a nonprofit called the All Nations Outreach that helps others get sober. We drove through the neighborhood that once represented so much pain and loss for him to talk about his experience. Has it gotten any better?
No, it's gotten worse. It's gotten worse. With what's in these drugs today, you know, that they're, you know, that it was around that time is, you know, it was crack and heroin and alcohol. But now after that, the ports are shut down, and you know the gangs and dealers have to get creative, and they you know, and now this fentanyl is introduced. It's already there, but it you know, it is basically the main drug now. You drive by here, you walk by here, you see everybody hunched over in 3 different directions, or face down into a dirty, bacteria-filled alley, right?
In January of 2023, what was hailed as a lifeline to help save lives, the BC and federal government approved a 3-year program that would make it legal to carry 2.5 grams of drugs.
As we all know, there is no recovery for someone who is dead. Last May, I announced that our government had approved an exemption request from the province of British Columbia so that adults 18 years and over in the province found in the personal possession of up to 2.5 grams of certain illegal drugs for personal use would not be arrested, criminally charged, or have their drugs seized.
Now, 3 years later, that pilot program has come to an end, with many critics saying it didn't work, including James Harry.
I give them credit for trying. They tried. But it is right, and I mentioned it before. All we're doing is giving these dealers a free pass and confidence to walk around with drugs in their pocket and not worry about getting pinched, right?
In 2016, the opioid epidemic exploded, and here in British Columbia, 16,000 people lost their lives to toxic drugs. Since then, the BC government has tried everything to help the situation. We sat down with BC Health Minister Josie Osborne to talk about the provincial government's plans on what they're doing next on the war on drugs.
Not one person is not touched by this crisis, and that's why we must continue to take an all-hands-on-deck approach, using all the tools and options that we have to build out a complete and comprehensive system of care that addresses everything from social determinants of health that impact reasons why people struggle with mental health and substance use, early interventions, prevention, treatment and recovery, and supporting people through recovery with aftercare and what they need, because for so many people, this is a lifelong journey.
Here on Vancouver's downtown Eastside, undoubtedly ground zero, many are wondering what can be done next to help those that are suffering with addiction. We met Holly Russell, who grew up in West Vancouver. She's been living on the streets for over 15 years and addicted to drugs. She has overdosed 4 times. Russell says the government has to do more to help others like her.
The safer supply, they should still be doing it. It helped a lot of people.
But
Grand Chief Stuart Phillips says the BC government needs to go back to the 4-pillar approach of harm reduction, prevention, treatment, and enforcement.
we were on a track that I thought was progressive in terms of harm reduction and decriminalizing the possession and use of small amounts of drugs that addicts require on a daily basis. But because of the extremism, the right-wing extremism, through political parties like the BC Conservative Party, now the province has abandoned that and has recriminalized possession and public use of drugs.
But the crisis hits closer to home for him. 7 years ago, his oldest son, Kenny, who was sober for a long time, decided to use one more time, not knowing that he took a fatal dose of carfentanil. He died instantly.
And he was gone before he hit the floor. So I have other members. One of my nieces was murdered in a drug war in the Okanagan. One of my nephews overdosed. So it's taking a huge number of our family members. And I would like to remind people that this is not simply an issue for governments or for policing. We all carry a responsibility to do what we can to support the people that carry an addiction.
The BC government says they are now focused on building more treatment centers to try and stop this crisis from taking more lives. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
We will have more news after the break. Don't go away. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Fran Etzel started her beautiful day by running into a lone moose just as the sun started to rise over the frost-covered tree line. Thank you for sharing that great picture, Fran. Remember, for the chance to be featured as our next photo of the day, send us your photos by email to share@aptn.ca. Time now for a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. On the East Coast, Halifax 1, Charlottetown -3, Nuujulak -22, Cartwright -8 and sunny. Partly cloudy in Quebec City at -9, Val d'Or -5, North Bay -9, Ottawa -3, -9 in Sudbury, Thunder Bay -10, -13 in Churchill, Thompson -9, Winnipeg -10, Dauphin -2, Swift Current -2, cloudy in Regina at -1, -12 in Stony Rapids, Buffalo Narrows -6, cloudy in Peace River at 0, Grand Prairie 1, 9 in Lethbridge, Red Deer 0, 14 in Vancouver, Campbell River 9, -8 in Fort Nelson, Smithers, rain in 4, -23 in Old Crow, Whitehorse -1, -17 in Fort Simpson, Wati -21, -32 in Sax Harbor, Colville Lake -20, Baker Lake -29, Cambridge Bay -31, and Resolute -36, Iqaluit -24. Manitoba's Indigenous country music scene has been blowing up on some big stages in recent years. William Prince played at the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville, Katie St. Germain played at the Grey Cup in Winnipeg, and Desiree Dorian just performed at last month's Winnipeg Jets game. Another artist, Jerry Soretta, is hoping for a big year. He was just recently named Manitoba's Indigenous Artist of the Year at the Manitoba Country Music Awards. We spoke to Jerry earlier today on APTN National News Daytime. Here's that interview. Jerry, thanks so much for joining us and congrats on your recent win. What did being named Manitoba's Best Indigenous Country Artist of the Year mean for you?
You know, I've been a big advocate for Indigenous musicians and Indigenous people for a long time. This year to be named Manitoba's Indigenous Country Artist of the Year was top of my career, I think. Not only because I got that title for this year, but this year, looking at the list of nominees that we had, there was more Indigenous artists in the list of Manitoba artists than there were non-Indigenous artists, which made me very, very proud because we're making huge strides in Manitoba and across Canada, making ripples. So that warms my heart. It shows that, you know, our voice is becoming bigger and bigger as we advocate for it.
That's so great to hear, and I agree with you. You've been around the industry for a while. How would you describe your journey?
It's been a long journey, you know. I always started out singing, songwriting with my grandparents. My grandmother taught me how to play guitar, and she always encouraged me to go places with it and to write songs and continue to tell my stories. But it's a battle. I mean, it's a struggle every single day that we get out there to write a song, every day that we release a song. And once the song's out there, every day is a push. You know, radio is a very hard nut to crack, I will say. so is television. And it's that dedication and perseverance, and you really have to get used to hearing no a lot. And if you can get past that, there's a lot of great opportunities and a lot of great resources, I suppose, to help people, especially right here in Manitoba. We have Manitoba Film and Music, and we have the Aboriginal Music, Indigenous Music Program right here in Manitoba, and they're constantly supporting Indigenous artists emerging, and I've even helped mentor some of them. So I think we're getting stronger and better. We just need people to keep bringing that creative artistry to us, and we'll help amplify their voice.
A lot of perseverance, eh?
Very much so, yeah. A lot of uphill climbing, but it's so worth it in the end to look back and see the journey.
Yes, for sure. In the era of streaming and social media, is it easier or more difficult to get your name out there?
It depends, I guess, again, how creative you are. One of the problems I think nowadays with musicians is, unless you have a whole label behind you or a whole team behind you, you kind of have to be a little bit of an expert in a lot of different areas. Social media, programming, making short clips, finding ways to engage with your audience who might not be able to come out and see you in person, which, you know what, has always been a great avenue for me, and one that I've always pushed for, because I have a lot of people who hear my music and support my music, but they're in remote communities across Canada and aren't always able to make it out, which is why I've always made it on our website. My motto is all of my music, always free, all the time. So anybody who likes my music can always go to jerrysereda.com and download any song for free. It's my gift to you, and we hope that we make it to your community.
No, that's great. And as we mentioned in the intro, Indigenous country music artists in Manitoba are having a big moment, whether it's William Prince or Desiree Dorian or Katie St. Germain. What do you think is behind all this talent? You talked about it a little bit there. Anything else you want to add?
Well, I mean, we've all grown up kind of in the same pocket of resources and working with each other and knowing each other and really being able to be there and rally behind each other to give that support when we're not getting it from other areas. And that translates to other people seeing it and they're like, whoa, there's some stuff happening in Manitoba that's like unheard of. This is amazing stuff, and we're helping move that needle forward, which is helping on a Canadian-wide context and even on a global context.
Mm-hmm. Perfect, I love that. Jerry Sereda, thank you so much for being here, and definitely come by again when you have some time.
Well, Chimigwich, thank you and merci to everybody, and I hope to see you all very, very soon.
And that's your evening newscast for this Monday. APTN National News Daytime is back tomorrow midday. Please join us then. We leave you now with more music from Jerry Sereda. From all of us at APTN National News, hi miigwech, masicho. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again next day.
I've been close to love.